Dirk Nowitzki, one of the all-time great power forwards and one of my personal favorite players in NBA history. As another tall, relatively skinny white dude, I am a huge fan of this man's game and how he played. And not only was he a beast, period, but he completely changed the stigma around European players in the modern NBA. We would not have Jokic and Giannis and Luka in the league dominating how they are today if we did not have Dirk come in and set the precedent 20 years ago. And while I think Dirk does mostly get the respect he deserves, I feel like a little too much of the credit for his career is placed on his 2011 run alone and not on his actual prime years during the mid-2000s. And that's what I want to talk about today, because as amazing as Dirk's 2011 title run was, and trust me, it was pretty freaking amazing, his prime from 2005 to 2007 were some of the best years we have ever seen from a basketball player, and I don't think it's acknowledged just how close Dirk was to winning 3 straight MVP awards at his peak while playing next to guys like Kobe Bryant, Tim Duncan, Steve Nash, Kevin Garnett, and LeBron James. This is the underrated prime of Dirk Nowitzki. In the 2004 NBA season, Dirk Nowitzki and Steve Nash led the Dallas Mavericks to 52 wins in the tough Western Conference and the best offense in the entire NBA. But sadly, this team did not look like a true contender, and the Dallas Mavericks were not yet willing to pay Steve Nash the money we would shortly see he very clearly deserved. So Nash left the team, and Dirk was left to carry the Mavericks more or less on his own, and carry them he did. As in the 2005 NBA season, a 26-year-old Dirk Nowitzki would take his team to 58 wins in what is possibly the toughest conference in the history of the NBA, being the mid-2000s West. Dirk did this while averaging 26 points, 10 rebounds, 3 assists, a steal, and a block and a half on 46, 40, 87 shooting splits. That is incredible efficiency for anyone, let alone someone scoring 26 points a game as the only star on their team. And just to be clear, it's not like Dirk had no help. This was not one of the greatest carry jobs ever, but it was a tier below that, as he was clearly the only star player on his roster. Michael Finley was a very good scorer in his own right, averaging 16 points a game, but he didn't do much else. Josh Howard and Jason Terry were not scrubs, but they had not broken out into the great players they would become, and while Jerry Stackhouse was a pretty darn good sixth man, he was just that, a sixth man. Eric Dampier, Keith Van Horn, and Marquise Daniels were solid players off of the bench, but none of these guys were star help like the other best players in the league had. And while I'm not going to say that Dirk was robbed of the MVP this year, it should definitely be noted that Steve Nash had a much better team than Dirk did in Phoenix. So, 2005 Dirk Nowitzki, 26 points, incredible efficiency, led his team to 58 wins, and somehow never gets mentioned in the 2005 MVP race, which was apparently just between Shaquille O'Neal in Miami and Steve Nash in Phoenix. 58 wins as the lone star was not enough for Dirk to get real MVP consideration in the year 2005. So what does he do in 2006? Well, he comes back and he becomes slightly better in just about every way. The Dallas Mavericks in 2006 would finish with a 60-22 record. Dirk Nowitzki would actually have a little bit less help than he had in the previous year, and yet he would put up even better numbers. As 2006 Dirk Nowitzki gave you 27 points, 9 rebounds, 3 assists, a steal and a block, and he shot 48, 41, 90% from both the field, 3, and then the free throw line. That is 3 things, not 2. I don't know why I said both. Now, once again, Dirk Nowitzki was not necessarily lacking help. He had some good players. Jason Terry and Josh Howard were really now starting to break out into the borderline all-star players they would become. Marquise Daniels was now a starter, and he was a solid role player for this team, and Jerry Stackhouse was still doing his thing as a solid sixth man of the year. But while Dirk was once again not necessarily lacking help for a generally good team, they did lose their previous number 2 scorer in Michael Finley, and their overall depth took a hit from the previous season. Dirk was still the only star caliber player on his team, and yet he led them to 60 wins in one of the toughest, most competitive conferences that has ever existed in the NBA. So when people come out and they discuss the 2006 season, why is it that once again, Dirk is barely mentioned in the MVP race? At least in the previous year, I will say that I believe Steve Nash did in fact deserve the MVP award. Not that Dirk shouldn't have been mentioned or shouldn't have gotten more votes than he did, but I am willing to give the award to Nash. But I will take it a step further in 2006 and say that this year, Dirk Nowitzki was the best candidate for MVP. It was not Kobe, it was not Steve, it was not LeBron James. It should have gone to Dirk Nowitzki as the best player on one of the best teams with some of the least help. 60 wins and 26 points on borderline 50-40-90 as the lone star should get you the MVP, especially when you consider that the Lakers just weren't winning too many games and Steve Nash did not have the greatest MVP numbers. So 2005, I think Dirk should have been one of the clear top 3 MVP candidates and should have gotten more hype, and then 2006, he should have won the award. Finally, we get to 2007, and let's get it out of the way, this season is infamous for one reason, and that is the fact that Dirk choked in the playoffs, and his Dallas Mavericks, with 67 wins and the first seed in the league, lost to the 8th seed Golden State Warriors in the first round, and there is no way around it. This was an embarrassment. The Mavs should not have played this bad, they should not have lost. Dirk choked. Yes, he played against his previous coach who knew the game plan for him. The Warriors were a crazy upset underdog story. Some of his teammates didn't play as well as they could have. This wasn't a talent-wise 67-win team, but nevertheless, there's no excuse for losing to the 8th seed in the first round. There's just not. This was a complete embarrassment, and it unfortunately takes away from the absolutely historic regular season that Dirk Nowitzki had. Once again, 67 freaking wins in one of the toughest conferences in NBA history. That's insane. And once again, also, he was the only true star on his team. Yes, Josh Howard did make an all-star appearance. He did. And I'm not even going to say it was undeserved. But this is the one and only all-star appearance of Josh Howard's career, in no small part than due to the fact that you just can't have a 67-win team with only one all-star. You've got to give somebody else on the roster an all-star prop, and this season happened to be Josh Howard. Jason Terry was also a borderline all-star caliber player himself. These two dudes were probably at their peaks right now. They were phenomenal help to Dirk. I'm not trying to claim this was a LeBron James 2009 level carry job, but at the end of the day, this was a single superstar with 2 borderline all-star caliber players next to him, and not a whole lot of depth when you look at the other guys on this team. Devin Harris, again, solid role player. Eric Dampier, clearly out of his prime at this point, still doing a decent job, but nothing great. Jerry Stackhouse, again, a solid 6th man of the year type season, but after those guys, after the top 6 players on this roster, who the hell is on this team? You've got Devian George, Sagana Diop, Greg Buckner. I know that you guys don't know all of these names. These are not great bench players for any team, much less a team winning 67 games. Meanwhile, Dirk Nowitzki was carrying this roster. He averaged 25 points, 9 rebounds, 3 assists, a steal and a block, and he did it on 42-90 shooting splits. That is one of the greatest scoring seasons of all time because of this man's incredible efficiency, and he did it while being 6'11". absolutely insane, completely game-changing for what big men in the NBA could do, specifically when it comes to shooting threes and making free throws. This was a season that would define the next generation of big men, especially European big men. A crucial year in the development of the modern NBA. And for all that, nobody really talks about it. We look back at the 2000 MVPs and we talk about Kobe a whole lot and how he deserves Steve Nash's MVPs, and the 2007 Dirk campaign kind of gets forgotten. I don't see anyone who argues he shouldn't have won the award, but I see a whole lot of people who just don't give a crap about it. Like, this wasn't a historically great season at the end of a historically great 3-year stretch. This is 3 straight years where Dirk could have very easily won all 3 MVP awards as the only true star player on his team, leading them to a crap ton of wins in a brutal conference. And while I've talked a whole lot about his offense in this video, I would just like to point out real quick what an underrated defender prime Dirk Nowitzki is. I know people saw him at the end of his career or the start of his career, and are like, oh, he's a slow white guy, he can't guard anybody. Prime Dirk was a clear positive on the defensive end. No, he wasn't a great rim protector, he wasn't even an amazing one-on-one defender, but he had enough length and IQ and just enough athleticism to not be barbecue chicken one-on-one, and to be a pretty darn good help defender on his team. The Dallas Mavericks had good defensive ratings during these prime years, and it's not like they had guys just locking people down. It was because there were a lot of solid defenders on the team, and one of those solid defenders was Dirk Nowitzki. So this is a two-way player, but specifically an offensive superstar who was carrying his team as the main guy. So when you talk about the greatest power forwards to ever play, the greatest peaks of all time, and specifically Dirk Nowitzki, I do not want people to forget that in his prime, this man was legitimately historic. It was not just the 2011 championship run that made Dirk Nowitzki a top 20 player ever. It was a 3-year stretch where he could legitimately be called the best player in the entire league and could have very well won 3 consecutive MVP awards, something no one has done since Larry Bird in the 1980s. Dirk Nowitzki was a beast in his prime and does not get the credit he deserves.